Hello there, welcome to my new history channel. My name is Redjoy, and let me ask you, do you like AI slop videos that try to teach about history? No? Funny thing, I don't like them either. If you want to help me and others stand up to Skynet, you should make sure that you like videos and subscribe to channels that actually teach history rather than sign up to channels that have beep boops acting as their brains for a quick buck. So what's up with this series? Well, I kind of got sick and tired of seeing article after article about, oh, look at this historical figure who is secretly a monster. And I kind of got sick and tired of reading the same thing over and over again for a clickbaity purpose. So I decided to create a series where instead of, see this amazing hero? Turns out he farted on an elevator once. And I decided to take it in a different direction to say, okay, you see this person who committed these horrible crimes or slaughtered thousands of people. Okay, that's bad, but why did they do it? Are they really unforgivable, or do they actually have a good reason for what they were doing? And so basically I wanted to create a channel that explored that and other historical topics. Well, I hope you guys enjoy it, and let me know in the comments below if there's people who I should talk about. I am going to reserve a couple of names that I'm not really sure if I'm going to cover, the big names, but please let me know. I am open to suggestions. I make sure I read through all the comments, and I'll let you know if I'm going to end up doing it, or it'll probably be a surprise. So now that we're past the 30-second mark of the opening of the video, I can finally talk about the guy who massacred lots of babies. Happy holidays, everybody! Many of us know the story of the Nativity, 3 wise men and the need for the Holy Family, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, to escape Bethlehem. The Christian tradition holds that the Judean king, worried about the birth of the new king of Judea in Bethlehem, ordered his soldiers to massacre the baby boys under the age of 2. Once this king died, an angel came to Joseph and told him it was safe to return. Today, we're going to chat about that king of Judea and why he felt he needed to, supposedly, go after the babies in this episode of The Villains Do. This is The Villains Do, where we take a critical look at villains throughout history to see if they were misjudged, slandered, or were truly monstrous. My name is Redjoy, and today we're going to look at Herod of Judea. Herod was born in 73 BC in the region just south of Judea. Through his father's connections, Herod entered public service early. By the age of 25, he was appointed governor of Galilee by Julius Caesar and the Roman Senate, during which he used his authority to take control and make further political connections in Judea and with Rome. Through his governorship, he gained the reputation for efficiency and brutality as needed. This reputation will go on to influence his future positions in the region. While Herod was rising in political power, Rome was engaged in a series of civil wars between Caesar, Pompey, the Senate, and then between Mark Antony and Octavian Caesar. It was a whole mess. Herod would have friendly interactions first with Mark Antony, but then he would later ingratiate himself with Octavian Caesar when the civil wars ended in 31 BC. While all of this was going on, Antony and Caesar used their personal influence to advance Herod's career through the Roman Senate in order to declare him to be the king of Judea and would support him as a client king of the region. By the time the civil wars ended, Herod was in control of Jerusalem and he was firmly in power. However, while Herod was in power politically, he was viewed as an outsider by the Judeans. He would marry into the Judean aristocracy. He would rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. He would fortify the region by building the fortresses of Masada and Herodium. And he would keep the region relatively stable. Even with all of this, the Judeans never really accepted Herod into the tight power and social structures of Judaism. The Second Temple of Jerusalem, which he built, is an excellent example of this. It was recorded by historians that only Jews could enter the temple, and even though Herod's family had converted years beforehand, the Judean temple priests forbade him to enter, citing that Herod had violated Jewish law through his takeover of the government. Some days you just never win. Herod purged many of his rivals and enemies. He had spied on the aristocracy. He used testimony to eliminate family members who were suspected of being disloyal. However, it was important to note that other rulers were using the same exact tactics to take control of politicians. The Roman Senate, who had confirmed Herod to be the king of Judea, had been those who were strictly loyal to Antony and Caesar, after a lot of other senators, like Cicero, would be eliminated or murdered as well. This wasn't new for the classical world. However, I do believe that Herod may have been considered tyrannical due to two well-recorded purges. First, Herod had many of his family members eliminated. His aristocratic wife and many of their sons would be accused of disloyalty and would be executed. Often, family members or influential courtiers would pit members of Herod's court against each other, and they would bring accusations that would be believed by Herod. Now, it could be argued that Octavian, now Augustus Caesar, would also exile or execute errant family members. But many of these could be explained away as harsh but understandable with Augustus's policies. According to historians like Josephus, Herod's family's executions came from the accusations from one family member against another, leaving the feeling that this was kind of more of traditional court intrigue that we see in like Crusader Kings or Game of Thrones. They were highly personal and they lacked real political logic. The second was the biblical Massacre of the Innocents of Bethlehem, in which he allegedly had all infant boys in the town of Bethlehem killed in an attempt to eliminate the, quote, newborn king of the Jews. The story came about after the nativity of Jesus, and Matthew explains in the gospel, quote, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, that were the three wise men, he was furious and gave orders to kill all the boys of Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. But this link was made directly by Matthew, who was the only one to have reported on the incident. While I don't make a regular habit of fully discounting biblical texts from historical records, there are a lot of biblical texts that actually did occur. There is only one other record made by a Roman writer, Macrobius. He wrote about it 400 years later. Contemporary writers such as Josephus and Nicholas of Damascus didn't write about the event, and the entire event may be more allegorical, may be connected to the idea of the Jewish prophecy of the coming of the Messiah as linked to the life of Jesus Christ. But this link was made directly by Matthew, and he was the only one to have reported on the event at the time. While Occam's razor could allow us to suggest this means the event didn't happen, it's not the only explanation. Perhaps it was such a small event that it wasn't anything notable that writers would write about. The killing of the infants, probably to us, is a bigger deal, but to them it was an event that was very small, resulting in only about 20 deaths, as suggested by Richard Thomas France, a New Testament scholar and Anglican cleric, who really wouldn't have any reason to doubt the weight of such an event. This would be very much a tragedy, but not the massive number from future sources within the Christian community. This silence could also come from the author's desires to report on how politics was impacted by decisions made by the rulers. For example, Josephus only wrote about Jesus in the relationship between the very early Christians who worshipped Jesus and the rest of the Judean state in exile and rebellion. Not only that, but Matthew, who was not considered a classical historian, was a tax collector who probably had some connections with the Judean government. This could suggest that he had information that Josephus didn't have access to, nor would have access to after the fall of Judea. This simplest explanation, that the event didn't happen at all, isn't quite so convincing. If we were to take this to a court of law, I don't know if it's fair to make this accusation of Herod. Herod would die shortly after the massacre in 4 BC, with Josephus writing about his grisly death as a mixture of sores and parasites and gangrene and extreme pain. My guess? Shingles. Is it an educated guess? No. From these records, we know that Herod died. It might have been really gross, but it might also be the fact that Josephus really didn't like Herod and wanted to make it seem as gross as possible. In looking at Herod critically, we see a man who was so tightly bound to the power that he wanted to maintain that he was willing to murder whoever he needed to in order to maintain that power. It's easy for us to judge the past too harshly based on our own modern viewpoints of violence and welfare and tolerance, and it was also just as easy to dismiss the distant past as being more violent and less considerate of life. However, when others at the time are commenting on how violent and brutal the actions of the rulers are, one has to consider if that violence is truly ordinary or if it's extraordinary. It was written by Macrobius that, apparently, Augustus had quipped, quote, "It was better to be Herod's pig than it was to be his own son," while referring to the executions of members of Herod's family, as well as the murder of the infants of Bethlehem. While this story may have just been that, a story, things weren't so much more peaceful and tolerant in 400 AD, when Macrobius is writing, versus the turn of the first millennium. The most famous event that Herod is known for, the Massacre of the Innocents, has issues as a historical event. However, it is clear that Herod eliminated family members based on court intrigue and quashed rebellion in Judea through his connection to the Roman military might and placating the population with domestic building projects. What can we make of Herod? My thought is that he certainly wasn't a great person. He wasn't a man of virtue. But he wasn't so much of an extraordinary tyrant except in the eyes of those who he worked against. Would I want to live under Herod in Judea? No. But then again, would I really want to live under Augustus of Rome? I'm not so sure.